They laughed the moment he walked into the room. A tall black man in work boots, dusty jeans and a thrift store flannel shirt. The crowd at the private auction turned their heads, not out of respect but to smirk. "You lost, sir?" one of them asked, a smug-faced developer in a pinstripe suit holding a glass of champagne. Another whispered to his colleague, "Probably here to clean up after the event." They all laughed. But he didn't flinch, didn't defend himself. He simply looked around the room, the polished marble floors, the sparkling chandeliers, the 100 or so millionaires and billionaires who had gathered to bid on foreclosed properties across the city, and then walked to the back row and sat down, silent. His name was David Morris. And though no one in that room knew it yet, he was about to change everything. The auction was being held inside the Crystal Gables Country Club ballroom, an elite, invitation-only gathering where generational wealth met corporate ambition. It wasn't a place where someone like David was supposed to be. Every bidder in the room had either inherited money or stolen opportunity. Many of them were the very people responsible for the housing collapse in the nearby neighborhoods, the same people who watched families of color be displaced, only to snatch up their homes for pennies and flip them for millions. They didn't expect resistance today. They expected to divide the city's pain amongst themselves. But they didn't know David's story. They didn't know he had been planning for this moment his entire life. 12 years ago, David was just a teenager living in Eastwood Heights, a proud black neighborhood that had been slowly strangled by redlining, predatory lending and broken promises. His mother, Grace Morris, worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over their heads. His father, a decorated Army veteran, died when David was only 9. Their home, modest, old but full of love, was the only thing they had left. That is, until the banks came for it. A clerical error led to their home being repossessed by a shell company. Overnight, David and his mother were thrown out, their possessions dumped on the curb like trash. David never forgot the way the auctioneers smiled as their home was sold off. He never forgot the suited men in expensive watches, sipping wine while placing bids, joking about how Eastwood was ripe for flipping. That day David made a vow, "One day I'll walk into an auction like that, and take it all back." And now here he was. The auctioneer, a smug man with a white beard and gold cufflinks named Robert Sterling, took to the podium and tapped the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we appreciate your presence today. The properties you're about to bid on represent incredible investment potential. Many are located in underdeveloped areas undergoing revitalization." A few people chuckled knowingly. Revitalization was code for gentrification. Let's begin with Lot 1, a multifamily brownstone in Eastwood Heights. Opening bid, $100,000. Instantly, paddles flew up. $120,000. $150,000. $180,000. The crowd was energized. David remained still, watching, calculating. The brownstone sold for $250,000 to a firm called Langston Holdings. They didn't even blink. Lot after lot, property after property, buildings that once housed black families, businesses, churches, were sold off like cattle. The room was alive with laughter, champagne toasts, and arrogant flexes. Some buyers tried to outbid each other just for sport. But David didn't move. He was waiting. Because he wasn't here to save one house. He was here to take back everything. Then came Lot 14. Lot 14, Robert Sterling announced, is a block of 10 properties in Eastwood Heights. Once home to local families and small businesses. Combined bid starts at $2.5 million. A hush fell over the room. This was the crown jewel. The properties were adjacent to a proposed development site, a potential gold mine if rezoned. David knew this. He had studied the maps, the city zoning laws, and every potential loophole. While others partied, he planned. The first bid came from a man named Cliff Masterson, a real estate mogul infamous for evictions and fast flips. $3 million, he called out. Applause followed. Others jumped in. 3.5. $4 million. 4.2. 5. The room was electric. Sterling grinned as the numbers climbed. David finally reached into his coat and pulled out his paddle. Slowly. The man next to him laughed. "You still here? You got enough to cover lunch, let alone $5 million?" David ignored him. $5.5 million, he said calmly. Heads turned. Sterling squinted. "I'm sorry, who was that?" David stood. 5.5. Cash. A ripple of confusion. "Sir," Sterling said carefully, "this is a cash-only auction. We'll need proof of funds immediately." David handed him a black envelope. Inside was a certified bank letter from Vanguard Federal Trust, confirming available liquid assets in excess of $20 million. The room went silent. Cliff Masterson scoffed. "No way. That can't be real." Sterling blinked, then passed the document to the compliance officer. "You read it? Stamped it? Confirmed it?" David simply raised his paddle again. "Still at 5.5. Your move." Suddenly the room didn't look so confident. The developers whispered. Phone calls were made. Cliff looked rattled. He hesitated. "6 million, he said, trying to recover. David didn't blink. 7. Gasp. 7.5. Another bidder yelled, now desperate. David raised his hand again. 8 million. People started murmuring. Who was this guy? The bidding war continued. 8.2. 8.5. But David never flinched. 9. 9.5. 10. By now, Cliff Masterson's face was red. He snarled, 10.5. David looked him dead in the eye. 12 million. The entire ballroom fell silent. Even Sterling looked stunned. "Sir, that's final offer?" David nodded. "Cash. Paid by morning." The room erupted. Cliff sat down hard, defeated. A man who had displaced hundreds, just lost to a man in work boots. Sterling, now visibly sweating, cleared his throat. "Sold, to Mr. David Morris, for $12 million. But the story didn't end there. As the crowd dispersed, reporters already outside trying to piece together who David was, Sterling approached him with a tight smile. "Impressive play," he said. "But do you know what you've bought? That block is legally complicated. Rezoning. Red tape. You may have paid too much." David smiled. "You think I didn't know that? My mother used to clean your office, Mr. Sterling. I read your contracts while waiting in the lobby as a kid. I've had your blueprint memorized since I was 16. Sterling's face froze. David continued, "I didn't just buy that block. I own the land rights around it. The easements. The alleyways. The air rights. You just watched me take back what you stole." But before David could leave, his phone buzzed. A text. "Unknown number. Nice play today. But you just stepped into the real game. We're watching you. Langston Holdings." David stared at the screen. The same Langston Holdings that bought Lot 1 earlier. He turned to Danielle, his business partner, who had joined him after the auction ended. "We have a problem," she said. "Langston's connected to Prescott International. And they've already filed a motion to contest your zoning rights. They want to freeze your assets before the sale finalizes." David's eyes narrowed. "You mean they're scared?" Danielle nodded. "But they've got political muscle. City council, legal teams. If they win the injunction, you lose the block." David turned, watching the auction hall empty out. "Then I guess it's time we show them who they're really dealing with." Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. David Morris didn't sleep that night. Not because he couldn't, but because he wouldn't. While the city was quiet, and the skyline blinked with luxury apartments he could never afford as a kid, David sat in his modest office at the back of his community co-op building, staring at zoning maps, legal codes, and city planning ordinances until his eyes burned. He had just won a battle, yes, but the war had officially begun. And his enemies weren't hiding anymore. Langston Holdings, a subsidiary of the infamous Prescott International, had fired the first shot, a quiet legal ambush meant to freeze his funds before sunrise. They filed an emergency injunction with the city's zoning board, claiming that David's $12 million purchase was invalid due to previous ownership disputes, historic use complications, and a conflict of interest. All buzzwords designed to delay and destroy. David's phone buzzed again. Another message from an unknown number. "We warned you. This block belongs to us. Walk away now or we make sure you never do business in this city again." Danielle paced behind him, still in her heels from the auction, typing on her tablet while firing off emails to attorneys, city officials, and allies. "Prescott's playing chess," she said, "and they've been doing it for decades. Their founder used to write the city code. You think this is just about you taking a block? No, David. You embarrassed them. In public. And now they want your head." David didn't flinch. That means they're off balance. He stood and walked to the wall where an old photo hung. His mother standing in front of their old Eastwood Heights home, holding a young David, the sun shining behind them. They stole everything from us, he whispered. Now I'm not just taking it back. I'm taking them down. Before dawn, David and Danielle were at the office of their attorney, Ms. Zora Whitman, a sharp-witted civil rights lawyer with a reputation for exposing corruption. She sat behind her desk in a black turtleneck and silver-rimmed glasses, flipping through the injunction papers. This is nonsense, she scoffed. They're claiming a deed violation from 1948 as grounds to cancel your sale. It's weak, but they're banking on two things: delay and intimidation. Danielle leaned in. Can we counter? Zora smiled. I'm already 3 steps ahead. I've filed an emergency motion to dismiss the injunction and attached evidence of clear title and uncontested bidding. But Prescott's not done. They'll try to play dirtier. False liens. Bribed inspectors. Political pressure. You're about to see how the rich stay rich. David folded his arms. Then it's time we stop playing defense. Zora raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? David opened his backpack and pulled out a thin black folder. Inside were photographs, emails, and internal documents, copies of files he had been collecting for the past 2 years. I've been tracking Langston Holdings. And they've been laundering gentrification deals through nonprofits they secretly fund. Fake community initiatives, shell LLCs, cash bribes to neighborhood boards. I've got signatures, timelines, witnesses. Zora's eyes widened. If this is real. It is, David said. And I want to go public. Danielle's eyes widened. That could get you killed, David? He looked at her. Then we make enough noise they can't shut us down without the whole city watching. By 10 a.m. the story had hit local news. Community entrepreneur exposes massive real estate fraud in Eastwood Heights. Radio shows picked it up. Black Twitter exploded. Hashtag Eastwood Exposed trended. The media, hungry for a David versus Goliath story, started circling. David's face appeared on morning talk shows, podcasts, and independent news streams. By noon, the mayor's office issued a statement saying they were reviewing the allegations with urgency. Prescott International denied all wrongdoing, but the damage was already spreading. Back at Prescott's Midtown headquarters, a storm was brewing. Maxwell Langston, the clean-cut CEO of Langston Holdings, slammed his fist against the glass table. Who the hell is this kid? He barked. He's one guy with a laptop and a lawyer, and he's making us look like amateurs. Margaret Prescott herself, now older but still chilling in her silence, sipped tea as she watched David's press conference on the screen. He's not a kid, she said. He's a symbol. And symbols are dangerous. Maxwell turned. What do we do? Margaret's eyes darkened. We ruin him. Quietly. Legally. And permanently. That evening, David received a call from an unknown number. Mr. Morris, the voice said. We represent a private investment group interested in buying your Eastwood properties. Our client is willing to pay triple what you just spent. $36 million. Immediate wire transfer. All we ask is that you walk away. David smiled bitterly. Let me guess, your client's initials are LH? The line went silent. Then the voice said coldly, take the offer. Or we come after everyone you care about. David hung up. His heart raced, but his mind was clear. This wasn't just about money. It was about principle. Community. Redemption. By midnight, a bombshell dropped. An anonymous source leaked to a major newspaper that David's financial backer, a local black-owned credit union, was being audited by the state. Overnight, their operations were frozen. David's liquid assets were suspended, and the deal he had just won at the auction was suddenly in jeopardy. Danielle burst into his office. They found a way to cut off our funding. David nodded slowly. They're trying to choke us. Zora called next. David, I just got word. There's another emergency motion being filed tonight. Prescott's trying to claim your financial sources were fraudulent. If the court accepts it, they could nullify the entire auction. David's voice was quiet. How long do we have? Not long, Zora replied. Unless we can prove your funding was valid and independent, they'll win. David stared at the ceiling, then at the photo of his mother again. Then he reached into his drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope he had never opened. His grandfather's will. Grace had given it to him before she passed, saying, "Read it when the time's right." He opened it. Inside was a letter. And a key. "David, if you're reading this, it means you're standing at the edge of something bigger than yourself. I left behind more than memories, I left behind protection. The real trust is buried where your father used to train you, where the swings creaked and the sand turned red. Use the key. Find what I built for you." The Morris name was never meant to bow. It was meant to build. David's eyes lit up. He knew exactly where to go. Danielle looked confused. "What is it?" He stood up, eyes burning with new fire. "It's not over. There's more money. More power. More truth than they ever expected. They tried to bury us, but we've got roots." He grabbed his coat and the key, storming out the door. "Where are you going?" Danielle called. David looked over his shoulder. "To where the legacy was buried." Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. David Morris drove through the silent streets of Eastwood Heights, headlights sweeping across boarded-up homes, cracked sidewalks, and rusted fences that once lined a proud community. The city slept, but David's mind raced. The letter from his grandfather clutched in his hand wasn't just a family heirloom, it was a lifeline. A secret reserve. A buried legacy. Where the swings creaked and the sand turned red. He knew exactly where that was. The old Morris Park, long abandoned, now overgrown and forgotten. It was the place where his father taught him how to throw a baseball, where neighborhood kids once played before gentrification drove families out and silence moved in. Now that same playground might hold the only key to saving everything he had fought for. The gate to the park was chained, rusted shut. David didn't hesitate. He climbed the fence like he had as a kid, landing hard on the other side. The moon bathed the playground in cold silver light. The once yellow slide was now gray with rust. The swing set stood crooked, one seat missing, the other dangling in the breeze. He walked to the sandbox, or what remained of it, a shallow pit with dried leaves and broken bottles. In the corner stood a familiar shape, the old steel equipment locker, bolted shut for decades. David dropped to his knees and pulled the old brass key from his pocket. His fingers shook as he fitted into the rusted lock. It clicked. Inside was a sealed military-grade metal case. David yanked it out and opened it slowly. What he found inside nearly knocked the breath out of him. Stacks of documents. Land deeds. Bank account information. Corporate charters. A trust, the Elijah Morris Foundation, registered in the Cayman Islands, tax-sheltered and protected under international law, untouched for over 30 years. His grandfather had created it during the civil rights era, shielding community wealth from being seized by banks and developers. And inside, a dormant fund worth over $18.4 million, legally earmarked for the redevelopment and protection of Black neighborhoods. It wasn't just wealth, it was ammunition. David stared at the papers, stunned. Danielle, who had followed quietly, stood behind him in disbelief. "Is this real?" she asked, holding up one of the notarized documents. David nodded slowly. "This changes everything." Back at the office hours later, Zora Whitman leaned over the documents, mouth slightly open. "I've seen trust documents but never like this. This is airtight. The funds are untraceable by Prescott. You can bypass the frozen assets completely. This gives you a new route to close the deal and fund a legal counteroffensive." Danielle's fingers flew across her keyboard, sending the new filings to city officials and reinforcements to David's legal defense. The clock was ticking. Meanwhile, Prescott wasn't sitting still. Inside a dark high-rise office in Midtown, Maxwell Langston stared at a wall of surveillance images. David at the auction, David at Morris Park, David walking into his lawyer's office. "How did we not know about this foundation?" he barked. Margaret Prescott didn't blink. "Because we underestimated his grandfather. Elijah Morris was a soldier and a strategist. We thought we erased him from the ledger, but it seems he planned for a long game." Maxwell hissed, "Then we hit him where it hurts. Call the city council. The zoning board. The banks. If we can't break him in court, we bleed him in the streets." By the next morning, news broke that the Eastwood Heights redevelopment plan, now connected to David's block, had been quietly killed by the city council. Pressured by Langston's lobbyists, the rezoning was withdrawn, making David's properties suddenly worthless on paper. Headlines read, "Community Heroes Purchase Backfires, $12 million Wasted?" But David didn't panic. In a press conference held in front of the very properties he had just purchased, surrounded by elders, business owners, and displaced families, David stood before microphones and delivered a speech that would go viral across the country. They told me this land had no value. But this land raised me. It raised my parents. It held generations before them. I didn't buy this block to sell it to someone else. I bought it to give it back to the people. And you can't put a price on home. Cheers erupted from the crowd. Cameras flashed. Reporters scrambled for interviews. David announced the formation of the Eastwood Cooperative, a non-profit development group funded by the Morris Trust, designed to rebuild and preserve homes for working-class black families. His words lit a fire. Other investors, black-led banks, HBCU business schools, even celebrity donors, began to reach out. Funding started to flow in. Prescott's legal team scrambled to respond. But the enemy moved swiftly. That same night, vandals firebombed one of the recently reclaimed properties. Fire trucks arrived too late. Flames consumed the structure. Local news crews arrived just as David stood in front of the charred remains, smoke rising behind him, his jaw clenched. Danielle stood by his side, tears in her eyes. "They're trying to scare you," she whispered. David didn't move. "Good. That means they know we're winning." Later that evening, David got a call. A known number again. A voice, deep, calculated. "You've made your point, Mr. Morris. But you're playing a dangerous game. This isn't your city. You're just renting time. Walk away before we end your lease, permanently." He hung up, fists clenched. Let them come. But then, the next call came. From Zora. Her voice trembled. "David, I just got off the phone with a judge. Someone has filed a petition claiming your grandfather's trust was funded with illegally obtained assets. They're trying to freeze the Morris Foundation." "What?" David's voice cracked. "That trust is clean. They're using forged documents. Fake whistleblowers. It's all orchestrated. But here's the worst part. They've subpoenaed your personal financial history. Everything. Including your taxes, your donors, your team." Danielle gasped. "They're not just coming after you, they're coming after us." Zora confirmed it. "If this gets approved, everyone you've worked with could be considered complicit. They're trying to make you toxic." David sat down slowly, the weight of it all hitting at once. His face was everywhere. His story was national. And now the machine had turned its full power toward crushing him. And then the biggest blow came. His mother's gravestone was vandalized. Spray painted with a warning. "Blood built this. Blood will end it." David stared at the image in silence. Danielle held his hand, but he didn't speak. His jaw was tight. His eyes burned. And then he stood. Without a word, he walked to his office safe, opened a secret compartment and pulled out a folder labeled Evidence, Operation Resettle. Danielle's voice shook. "David, you said you'd never go public with that." He turned to her, voice low and dangerous. "I'm done playing nice. If they want war, I'll show them what the Morris bloodline really stands for." Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift black voices and expose hidden truths. David Morris stood in the middle of his office, the folder in his hands burning like fire. Operation Resettle. It wasn't just a file. It was a loaded weapon, a blueprint of systematic displacement, signed, stamped, and orchestrated by none other than Prescott International. It detailed a covert initiative carried out over the last 20 years, targeting historically black neighborhoods through shell companies, fake land auctions, fraudulent tax liens, and politically connected rezoning tactics. The names listed in the file read like a roll call of corruption. City council members, judges, bankers, and even developers who publicly claimed to be community partners. Some of the very people who had smiled to his face were on Prescott's payroll the entire time. And his grandfather had known. Elijah Morris had compiled the evidence before his death but held it in silence, perhaps waiting for the right time. That time was now. Danielle sat nearby, stunned, her eyes wide as she scanned through pages of maps, documents, and photos, each one painting a clearer picture of a machine built to exploit and erase black families from their own land. "If we leak this," she whispered, "they'll come for you, David. Like really come." David looked at her, calm but defiant. "They already did. They torched our properties, froze our funding, dug up my mother's grave. This is bigger than me now. This is our people's fight." He placed a call to Zora Whitman, who answered immediately. "We're in deep," David said. "But I've got something that might break the whole system wide open." Within the hour, they were seated in Zora's high-rise law office, surrounded by her most trusted legal aides, scanning the contents of the Operation Resettle folder. Zora's lips tightened with every page. If this goes public, it could spark investigations, indictments, maybe even federal charges. David leaned forward. "Then let's make sure the right people see it, before Prescott buries us first." Zora nodded. "I know who to call. A federal housing watchdog, retired but still respected. If we deliver this to her with corroborating evidence, she can elevate it directly to the Department of Justice. But we'll need to move fast and quiet. Prescott has eyes everywhere." Meanwhile, across town, inside the fortress-like Prescott International headquarters, Maxwell Langston slammed his hand against a mahogany desk. "How the hell did he get the resettled documents?" he roared. Margaret Prescott remained eerily calm, stirring her tea without looking up. "Because Elijah Morris wasn't just a man, he was a ghost. And you cannot silence a ghost with threats. Only fire." Maxwell sneered. "Then we burn everything. The co-op, the law firm, the media outlets supporting him. Make him untouchable. Make him disappear." Margaret's voice dropped like a dagger. "If we let this story reach Washington, we're done. Take care of it." Back at the Eastwood Co-op, David and Danielle worked through the night. They converted the physical documents into digital formats, uploading them into encrypted servers. They reached out to trusted allies, Black journalists, local clergy, student organizers, and old heads from the neighborhood who had seen the effects of Operation Resettle firsthand. Word spread like wildfire. Whispers became tweets. Tweets became headlines. And by sunrise, #ExposePrescott was trending in every major city. The story was too big to hide. Too detailed to deny. Even city officials who once looked the other way began issuing panicked statements about newly discovered evidence and calls for transparency. But Prescott didn't flinch, they counterattacked. By noon, David's personal email was hacked. His bank accounts showed massive withdrawals he never authorized. Anonymous calls to the IRS claimed he was laundering money through shell nonprofits. News outlets that once supported him suddenly ran stories questioning his integrity. Photos were leaked, fabricated images placing David at fake crime scenes. One headline read, "Eastwood Savior or Secret Swindler?" Danielle grabbed his arm. "David, this is character assassination. They're trying to turn the people against you." David didn't blink. "Then we show them the truth before it's too late." He made a decision. They'd take Operation Resettle live. That night, David appeared on a live stream broadcast through local channels and independent platforms. Behind him stood rows of Black families displaced by redevelopment, small business owners who lost their leases, and elders who had been ignored and pushed out. David spoke calmly, clearly, powerfully. "What you're about to see is proof that Prescott International and their subsidiaries systematically targeted our communities for profit. They hid behind laws they helped write. They took our homes, our schools, our history. But today we take our voices back." He displayed the documents on screen, page by page, breaking down how the operation worked. Viewers flooded the chat with rage, support, and tears. Within the hour, national media picked it up. But not everyone celebrated. As the truth went viral, so did the threats. An unmarked black SUV began circling the co-op. Surveillance drones appeared over the Eastwood properties. Danielle's apartment was broken into. No money taken, just her laptop and hard drive missing. And then it got worse. Zora called, her voice trembling. "David, the federal contact we were working with, she's gone missing. Last seen leaving her apartment this morning. Her car's still there. Her phone's off. No security footage." David froze. "You think Prescott?" Zora cut him off. "I know it's them. They're sending a message." David clenched his fists. "So what now?" Zora paused. "Now we survive. And we prepare for court. I filed the lawsuit tonight, Morris versus Prescott International, alleging racialized displacement, financial fraud, and conspiracy. We're going to federal court. You're the lead plaintiff." Danielle's jaw dropped. "You're going public in court?" David nodded. "I won't let fear win. Not this time." Zora warned, "They're going to come after you harder than ever. Once we serve this, It becomes the biggest civil rights lawsuit this city has seen in decades. That night, as David returned home, he found something on his doorstep. A white envelope. No name. Inside was a photo of him as a child, standing in front of his old house, with a red X drawn over his mother's face, and a single line scrawled beneath it. "You're not your grandfather. Stop before we bury your legacy next." David's knees nearly gave out. He collapsed into the doorway, breath shallow, heart pounding. Danielle rushed to him, holding him up, tears spilling down her cheeks. "David, we can stop. Just stop. You've done enough." But David shook his head. "No," he whispered. "They think threatening our past will scare us from protecting our future. But I was born for this fight." He stood, straightened his back, and made the call. "Zora, serve the lawsuit. First thing tomorrow morning." Zora's voice came through the line, steady and proud. "It's already done." David looked out the window, across the night sky of a city trembling under the weight of truth. And then, a bomb exploded at the Eastwood Community Resource Center. Smoke, sirens, flames, screams in the distance. Danielle screamed. David dropped the phone. He ran into the street, barefoot, eyes wide, heart racing. The very building they had turned into a safe haven. The building where he had launched his movement, now engulfed in flames. Black elders screamed. Children cried. The mural of Grace Morris, painted just weeks earlier, now licked by fire. David fell to his knees in the street. And then he heard it. A voice from behind. Cold. Familiar. Whispering. "We told you, this isn't your city." Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. David Morris stood frozen in the street, smoke swirling around him, the screams of his community echoing off shattered windows and blazing walls. The Eastwood Community Resource Center, his foundation's first success, was now engulfed in flames, a calculated message sent by the very people he had spent years fighting. Fire trucks howled in the distance. Children sobbed. Elders stood in stunned silence, clutching each other as the mural of Grace Morris, David's late mother, was swallowed by fire. Danielle knelt beside David, blood on her forehead from falling debris, but she didn't cry. She just stared at the blaze, her heart breaking not just for the building but for everything it symbolized. "They knew exactly what they were doing," she said quietly. David didn't answer. He couldn't. Because in that moment he wasn't just watching a building burn, he was watching a piece of his legacy being erased, again. But this time, it wouldn't end like it did for his parents. Or his grandfather. This time, the flames would not silence the truth. The very next morning, the fire inspectors released their initial report. Suspicious cause. Gasoline residue. No alarms triggered. Security footage wiped clean. David and Danielle sat in Zora Whitman's office as she handed them a folder. The federal judge has agreed to fast-track the lawsuit. A hearing's been set in 10 days. The Morris versus Prescott case will be heard before a 3-judge panel, and the DOJ is watching. David's eyes narrowed. "Then we bring the truth. All of it." Danielle leaned forward. "What if they try to block evidence?" Zora smiled coldly. "They've tried. But we've made multiple backups distributed to press, allies and whistleblowers. Even if they take me out, they can't stop this now." Over the next week, momentum built like a tidal wave. The story of Operation Resettle reached national news. Former city officials came forward. A retired judge confessed on live television that he had ruled in favor of developers under pressure from Prescott lobbyists. Community leaders marched in Eastwood Heights, holding up signs that read, "This land is ours, and not for sale." Donations poured into the Eastwood Cooperative. Celebrities, athletes, and even members of Congress voiced support. But the threats didn't stop. David's car was tampered with. His uncle's small business was vandalized. A gunshot was fired through the window of the co-op's temporary office. Still, he didn't back down. Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. The courthouse was surrounded by media vans, protesters, and police barricades. Inside, David sat at the plaintiff's table beside Zora and Danielle, facing a row of Prescott's top attorneys, polished, soulless, and determined to bury him. But what Prescott didn't count on was that David came prepared. Zora began the case by presenting the full scope of Operation Resettle. Documents, testimonies, secret recordings, zoning maps, and bank records that showed how Prescott had systematically acquired black neighborhoods through deceit, intimidation, and political corruption. She detailed how families were forced out of their homes, how small black-owned businesses were crushed under fraudulent liens, how shell companies disguised as urban revitalization groups were actually Prescott-owned fronts. Then David stood, calm, strong, unwavering. He faced the judges, and the entire courtroom held its breath. "I didn't come here today for money," he said. "I didn't come for revenge. I came for justice. My grandfather fought for this land. My mother died trying to keep us here. And I watched them both be erased by systems designed to silence us. Prescott International didn't just steal property, they stole generations. They turned our pain into profit. But today, we take our power back." A hush fell over the room. Even Prescott's attorneys shifted in their seats. Zora introduced their final witness, a former Prescott executive turned whistleblower. The man confirmed everything: the internal memos, the buyout orders, the intimidation tactics. He even testified that Maxwell Langston personally approved Operation Resettle's Eastwood Heights expansion. That was the final blow. After hours of arguments, the judges recessed. Everyone waited, nervous, breathless. When they returned, the lead judge read the verdict. In the matter of Morris versus Prescott International, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Cheers erupted. The court awarded $75 million in restitution to the Eastwood Cooperative. But more importantly, the judges ordered a federal investigation into Prescott's real estate activities. All current development projects were frozen. Subpoenas were issued. Arrests followed in the days to come. Prescott's stock plummeted. Maxwell Langston resigned under pressure. Margaret Prescott released a cryptic statement, then vanished from the public eye. And David Morris? He went back home. Back to Eastwood Heights, where rebuilding began immediately. The community center was rebuilt, brick by brick. The mural of Grace Morris was restored, larger, brighter, unbreakable. David used the court winnings to create a fund for first-time black homeowners, affordable housing, and legacy protection for families at risk of displacement. Schools reopened. Gardens bloomed. Music returned to the streets. At the grand reopening ceremony of the new Eastwood Community Hub, David stood on the steps surrounded by hundreds of smiling faces. Danielle stood beside him, her hand in his. Zora sat near the front, her eyes full of pride. The media rolled, but David ignored them. He looked up at the sky, at the place where the sun broke through the clouds, and whispered, "We did it, Mama." Because in the end, they tried to mock him. They tried to erase him. They tried to burn his legacy down. But David Morris outbid them all, not just in dollars, but in truth. Studio microphone, cue triumphant orchestral swell, camera pans out over the revitalized Eastwood neighborhood, kids playing on the restored swings, elders dancing in the park, banners reading, "We are still here." Never judge someone by their appearance, and never underestimate the power of purpose, legacy, and community. What the world sees as weakness may be the very foundation of unstoppable strength. True wealth isn't just money, it's history, honor, and the courage to reclaim what's rightfully yours. The end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths.